In October 2026, wildlife photographer Ethan Walker traveled to a remote valley in northern Scotland after hearing strange stories about an abandoned farm that locals refused to visit after sunset. According to the villagers, the farm had once been one of the busiest in the region. Hundreds of sheep, cows, horses, and chickens lived there. Then, one cold autumn night, every animal disappeared. No broken fences, no blood, no tracks, only silence. Police investigated the disappearance, but found nothing unusual. The gates were still locked from the inside, the barns were intact, and every feeding trough remained full, as though the animals had vanished in the middle of their evening meal. 40 years later, the farm still stood exactly as it had been left. Ethan arrived just before sunset. The wooden farmhouse leaned slightly to one side, its windows clouded with dust. The barns were old but surprisingly well preserved. He began taking photographs of the empty buildings, expecting to capture nothing more than another forgotten place. Then he noticed something strange. Fresh hay had been spread across the floor of the largest barn. It smelled as though it had been placed there only hours earlier. Curious, Ethan followed the trail until he reached an old feeding area. There, hanging from a rusted nail, was a weathered wooden sign. Only 4 words had been painted across it. Feeding time midnight. Ethan smiled. The message had to be an old joke left by the former owner. He continued exploring until darkness covered the valley. Just before leaving, he heard the sound of a bell. One clear ring echoed across the empty farm. Then another. It came from inside the largest barn. Ethan slowly stepped through the doorway. The building was completely empty. No movement. No animals. Nothing. Then he looked down. Fresh hoofprints had appeared in the layer of dust covering the floor. They crossed the barn from one wall to the other, but they stopped abruptly in the middle of the room. Beyond that point, there were no prints at all, as if every animal had simply vanished into thin air. At that exact moment, his camera shutter clicked by itself. When Ethan checked the photograph, he felt his heart race. The barn wasn't empty. Standing quietly behind the wooden fence were dozens of animals. Watching him, every one of them stared directly into the camera. But when he looked up, the barn was silent once again, completely empty. Ethan couldn't stop staring at the photograph. The empty barn he had just left was suddenly filled with animals. Cows, horses, sheep. Even the old sheepdog stood beside the wooden gate. Every one of them looked directly into the camera. Yet when Ethan raised his eyes, the barn remained completely empty. The following evening, he returned to the farm with fresh camera batteries and several motion sensors. Just before midnight, the old bell rang again. Once, twice, then complete silence. Suddenly, every motion sensor activated at the same time. Something was moving through the barns, but the cameras showed nothing, only drifting dust. Then Ethan heard a horse neigh somewhere behind him. He turned around. No animal was there, only fresh hoofprints appearing one after another across the dusty floor. They formed by themselves, as though an invisible herd was walking through the building. The footprints led outside. Ethan followed them into the moonlit field. Halfway across the pasture, they stopped. The grass ahead remained perfectly still. Then, without warning, hundreds of animal sounds echoed across the valley. Cows mooed. Sheep bleated. Horses neighed. The noise lasted only a few seconds before disappearing into the night. Ethan quickly raised his camera. This time, the screen showed something impossible. The entire field was full of animals standing silently beneath the moonlight. None of them moved. None of them blinked. They were simply watching him. A second later, the image disappeared. The field was empty again. Near the old stone well, Ethan discovered a faded metal plaque almost hidden beneath the grass. After wiping away the dirt, he read the inscription. No animal ever left this farm. At that exact moment, the old bell rang for a third time. A cold wind swept across the valley. Then another sentence slowly appeared beneath the first, as though the metal itself had begun writing. They're still waiting to be fed. For the first time, Ethan realized the farm wasn't abandoned. Something still believed the animals were there. Ethan didn't leave the farm that night. He couldn't. The words engraved on the old metal plaque echoed in his mind. They're still waiting to be fed. A thick fog slowly rolled across the fields, covering the barns and fences. The moon disappeared behind the clouds. Then the old bell rang again. One long, lonely chime. This time, Ethan followed the sound to the largest barn. The wooden doors slowly creaked open on their own. Inside, every feeding trough was full. Fresh hay covered the floor. Buckets of clean water stood beside each stall. It looked as though someone had prepared the barn only minutes earlier. Then he heard it. The unmistakable sound of animals eating, chewing, hooves scraping the wooden floor, chains gently rattling. The noises came from every corner of the barn. Yet there was nothing there. Only empty stalls. Ethan lifted his camera. Through the screen, the barn was alive. Dozens of cows stood quietly feeding. Horses moved slowly between the stalls. Sheep rested together on the fresh hay. Everything appeared peaceful. One old farmer walked among them, carrying a lantern. He stopped, turned toward Ethan, and smiled. Then he quietly pointed to the open barn door, not as a warning, as an invitation to leave. The camera suddenly lost power. When Ethan looked up, the barn was empty once again. The sounds had vanished. Only silence remained. As dawn approached, Ethan packed his equipment and drove back to the village. Before leaving, he looked at the farm one last time. The fog had lifted. The building stood abandoned. No movement. No footprints. Nothing. Months later, while reviewing thousands of photographs from the expedition, Ethan noticed something he had missed before. Every picture taken inside the barn showed the same wooden sign. But in the final photograph, another line had appeared beneath it. "Thank you for feeding us." No one could explain how the words had appeared. When Ethan returned to the valley the following year, the farm had completely disappeared. The fields were empty. There were no barns, no farmhouse, no fences. According to every official map, no farm had ever existed there. Only Ethan's photographs remained, and in every one of them, hidden in the background, a pair of glowing eyes could still be seen watching from the darkness. Perhaps the animals never vanished. Perhaps they simply found a place where no footprints could ever be left behind.